Hello, and welcome to Movies We Dig, the podcast about antiquity, movies, and everything in between. I'm Christy Vogler.
I'm Elijah Fleming.
And I'm Colin McCormick. And Christy is having a hard time. We're having a very technically difficult day in a way that never has ever happened to us before. And so we're having a hard time keeping a professional composure on this.
I'm having fun.
Spring break.
Yeah.
We have spring break brain.
I just spent the day watching this show so that I was caught up. So, sorry.
And today we are talking about the BBC's Atlantis miniseries. Very exciting. And even more exciting is the very special guest we have today. She's talked about Atlantis. She's been talking about Heracles. And today she's going to talk about a kind of mashup of the two today. We have Liv Albert from the podcast Let's Talk About Myths, Baby. And we're going to open with, did you dig this miniseries?
Well, I'm going to give you the long answer. So I had not really heard of this show before I started doing the Atlantis deep dive that I did, and so a lot of people asked me about it. People asked me a lot about just generally what classical reception things I have and have not seen and what my notes are. And typically my response is I'm just going to tell you why a movie is bad or wrong compared to the myth. So how much do you really want to hear? That's no fun. So I'll just say I hadn't really heard of this before that. And then, so I'm watching it for the absolute first time and I actually do like it. I dig it, at least, for what it is and for in the wider realm of classical reception.
Awesome. And Elijah was the first on board, was watching it before all of us, and she was texting me all this silliness that was happening. So, Lige, what were your thoughts on this?
I was very surprised, I think, because I had no idea of what I was getting into. I had never heard of this before either. And I was surprised at how relatively recent it was. I guess 2013 is not that recent anymore, but it feels recent.
It really does. You're not alone.
Yeah, and I just was giggling and cackling at the beginning of this, which starts in modern day and has a time travel element or a world travel element. And so I was really delighted by the campiness, by all of the things that I could point out as I know that myth, which I think was probably the goal. I do think that I got bored because I do have questions on the audience about who this was really catered for. Especially in a post Game of Thrones world, which is something that we can sort of get into. Yeah, I didn't fully dig this. I think I digged a lot of aspects of it, but I also, maybe I'm not the target audience. Yeah, that's where I'm landing.
Yeah, or Colin suggested that maybe he was the target audience. So I don't know, Colin, what did you think?
Potentially. When this came out, maybe. Well, I'm maybe the most curmudgeonly, but it's really hard for me to particularly when it's something I'm reviewing for the show and something that touches upon my professional field to turn off my critical sort of brain, because and Liv was sort of saying I don't want to just go through and be well, that's not how it was in the book or whatever, because that's no fun for anyone, and just not I think that's the wrong way to watch movies. So as I got into it, I found myself enjoying it more. It is schlocky and campy and light and fun in a way that it's, again, particularly because this is sort of cast into the shadow of Game of Thrones. One, because it's coming out 2 years or something after Game of Thrones. Two, because it has a lot of shared actors, Mark Addy being the most obvious, who plays Hercules. And so it just feels it's tonally wildly different. So I was kind of my kind of consensus is I don't dig it as much, and I think that is because it's not necessarily because it is deviating from any kind of source or anything like that, but I think what it does with myth is very sort of surface level and kind of shallow in a way that I find uninteresting and I kind of want more from. But that said, I am not made of stone, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't get a chuckle from me every now and then.
I think I must have I have such low standards, I think, in terms of what makes a good mythical retelling on screen. And so I think for me it's mostly that they didn't decide to make all these weird, deeply non-mythological things happen. Like, I think I'm too used to Clash of the Titans or like the Immortals or all these different things where it's like none of that is from the myth. Whereas this is it's campy, it's silly, it makes some very bizarre choices that I'm sure we'll get into in terms of just the whole use of Atlantis. But also like it actually touches upon a lot of things that are explicitly Greek myths in a way where I'm like, that enough. That alone is like, I think maybe all I needed to be like, this is enjoyable for me.
Yeah. So like the context for people who haven't seen the show, though you can see it on Amazon, free to stream, but the sort of premise that we get through very quickly, and the framing device is done away with almost within the first 5 minutes, is that Jason is a modern day, I don't know what, he's a guy whose dad disappeared in like a submarine accident. And
I don't know.
yeah,
I just can't not laugh.
He's in a bizarre little submarine.
Yeah, and so he goes in this little like submersible, and then he gets sucked into a whirlpool a la Thermae Romae into another world. And so again, one of my main questions is he in like another dimension, like Eli was kind of getting at, or is he in the past? Like, is this history?
Yeah.
Because that's like where this that's where this show gets kind of weird, because it's kind of this blend, you like if you take a big pot, a crater, a bell crater, if you will, and you mix in everything anyone has ever said or heard about ancient Greece, primarily myth, and you mixed it all up, and then you like skim the sort of stuff off the top. That's what this show is.
Pythagoras with his triangles.
Yeah, like, why is Pythagoras the only real person?
Right? This is real. That was a thing.
Yeah, so Liv could probably tell us in great detail because she's just finished a whole miniseries on Atlantis. This show also has very little to do with Atlantis. Like, there's almost no like Atlantis. It's just a place for where all myths happen. That's basically what Atlantis is in this show.
What's so silly to me, and I don't know what kind of structure you guys want, so stop me if I'll just go off too much, but why Atlantis? Like, I guess the obvious answer is that people love Atlantis. First, quick question, can I swear on this show?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Great. People fucking love Atlantis. And that alone, I think, is like just a huge problem of society, because Atlantis is not a Greek myth. It's not part of history. It's literally nothing. Like, it's nothing. And so just the use of Atlantis is so bizarre. But then also to make it pretty explicitly just Crete. We're like, everything here is just Crete. You put Heracles in, you called him Hercules for no good reason other than that, and Pythagoras. Like, you could have just made it Crete. And so and then, so to me, I'm like, okay, maybe they're like, it's a different dimension. It's not history. They wanted to make it Atlantis. It's a whole other world. Okay, fine. And then you get Pythagoras, which throws it off. And then not only that, but he does at some point say that he grew up on Samos. So then I go, okay, so we have these mythical, not mythical, nonsense places of Atlantis and Helios, but then also Samos exists. What are we doing with history and mythology here? What is the decision being made?
The geography also kind of bugged me. I was like, where is this supposed to be?
Well, I think it's
because
supposed to be
they talk
Atlantis,
about other places. But like, well, they talk about other places like in the Greek world, but they don't like, and they like go other places. They're like in a desert at one point.
You mentioned Colchis too, right?
In the second season, though, the Colchians like show up as like an army. So like Colchis, which is sort of a real. I mean, we could at least put it on a map.
Right.
But yeah, they mention places like Samos or Chios. They mention like real places, but then Atlantis is sort of in this because, well, the reason is they filmed in two locations. They filmed in Morocco for all the desert scenes, and they filmed in Wales, which you'll notice after you watch for a while that there's they're either in a desert or they're in that same forest.
It's very Troy Fall of a City, where you're like, this looks like the United Kingdom, very explicitly.
Yep.
And then everything that wasn't an exterior was a sound lot.
And I kind of wondered about going back to Jason being from our world for 5 hot minutes.
Yeah, we're already like...
We're everywhere. Also, the whole undertone of the entire story, I swear to God, is Aladdin. It is just Aladdin. It is him running through the streets, avoiding guards, watching slow-moving fruit fall into the street.
I can hear the song
and then trying to
playing.
get the cute girl that looks a lot like Jasmine. Like, so much of that. But also, so him being from the modern world, it seems like they're setting him up to like have knowledge about these different characters. Like, oh, I know the name Medusa, and like at the very end of one of my favorite episodes is Oedipus. He's like, ooh, that might have not have been a good choice. But at the same time, he never explicitly shares this knowledge. So he's like, oh, I've heard that name before, but I have no idea what any of this is. So it's like, I can't decide if he is supposed to be informed or just not.
The Medusa suggests he is informed because he's like, she's going to have a bad fate. I don't want this to happen to her. Like he says that explicitly to the Oracle. But the Oedipus, yeah, it's like as soon as I saw the baby in the woods with a foot, I'm like, well, I think we can all know who this is. Like, let's watch out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's it. The whole show has that kind of energy, which I think comes back to like why Atlantis, why the characters are the characters they are. And like my thesis is basically it's Atlantis because it has the catchiest, most sort of like a broad appeal sort of name of anything that, you know, you can have a single word for in from the Greek world, which is again I think why the main hero is Jason, for no other reason that we know that's a name of a hero and it's a name from the modern times, so we can sort of like that's why he's Jason and not say Theseus or
Theseus
Perseus,
wouldn't
which
make
is
any sense. And...
Yeah. And why it's Hercules is in there and why Pythagoras, because these just all have like name recognitions, and that's like kind of the attitude. Like, so well, most of the things we get, because the first couple episodes are primarily kind of like a monster of the week sort of thing. Like there's some kind of adventure. It's very episodic, and then it gets a little more serialized towards the end.
No, I think his name as Jason, I think, is very much like the entire show is the meme of Leonardo DiCaprio pointing.
Yes.
Like, I get that. I see that.
Yes.
I know that. And they even like make fun of his name, right? They're like, Jason, what kind of a hero's name is that? Which I chuckled. I thought that was funny.
the hero, Jason, deserves that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to talk about Jason actually really quick, but just to come back to Christy's point about like, yes, one of my main questions was like, is Jason bringing future knowledge back with him? Because he seems to know, you know, when he hears Hercules' name and Pythagoras and all these other, he like knows about it, but that future knowledge kind of, he never says anything or it never informs, you know, he like kind of knows he's in the myth, but he just sort of buys in completely in a way that's sort of very silly. Because again, because he's not from Atlantis, he works as a good sort of like guide for the audience because he doesn't know what things are, so other characters have to explain it to him and therefore us. But he never actually like, you know, if he is sitting on, like, how much Jason knows about ancient myth is very much open because it never seems to impact or inform anything he does other than just like a knowing look. And it reminds me of like, there's a scene, this is going to be kind of a left field, but have you ever seen the second Star Trek movie, Into Darkness, of the new ones, not Wrath of Khan? But there's a part where Benedict Cumberbatch goes, I am Khan. And that's clearly for the audience because they know Khan is like a big villain from the Star Trek. But like in that movie, Khan's name is meaningless. Like he hasn't existed yet. And so like Kirk and Spock and the others are like, why'd you say your, you know, they would have been like, why'd you say your name all weird like that? And I feel like that's kind of what's going on in this show. But yes, I want to pivot to talk a little bit about just Jason in this versus Jason elsewhere.
I mean, he takes his shirt off a lot, which looks good.
I wrote down in my notes, I see you managed to take your shirt off.
Eventually, like, we take his pants off. just to keep it well-rounded.
I think he's such a nicer Jason. Like, I would take this Jason in a second. He's not an asshole. He's like, I mean, and granted it's because he's the hero of the show, but I just think that goes to show what Greek heroes were actually like in comparison to what we think of now. But as for Jasons, I like this Jason.
I like this Jason a lot too because it goes against the problem we've had with a lot of Greek heroes depictions in films that we've talked about of just like blank character doing like, you know, standard hero stuff versus this one. He's like, he gets his ass kicked. He's running away all the time. And every once in a while, like great idea comes through, or like he does have like this superhuman ability that comes through, but it doesn't always win him a fight at the end of the day. And I liked that this wasn't like he's just the be-all end-all hero and automatically is going to win. He's not always winning, and I actually really enjoyed that aspect of him. It made him more human, if less Greek heroic in the very end.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like how Jason, Pythagoras, and Hercules are just kind of roommates. and they just kind of like hang out and like try to kind of survive there. That's like that could be a different show if we took out all of the sword fighting and the magic. It's like them just like trying to like do a weird job to like eat dinner. It is very human, yeah. And I did enjoy those parts of it where it's like the weird roommate drama. Hercules is always drunk. Pythagoras always has triangles. Like, it's great.
One thing I just thought of is like, why not Plato? If you're gonna have a real person, like, why Pythagoras? There's got to be something I'm missing when it comes to like some kind of modern connection between Pythagoras and Atlantis, because like obviously Pythagoras came long before Plato invented Atlantis to prove his point. But in the Assassin's Creed Odyssey game, when they go to Atlantis, it's also all about Pythagoras. And I'm like, what is this? Is it just because he was like a weirdo and he had all those weirdo followers? Like they just connect weird to Pythagoras versus...
I have so many thoughts because like Pythagoras to me is kind of emblematic of like the problems with the show, of like everything we talked about, like the weird history myth thing, and also just like kind of the reduction that a lot of these characters kind of go through, because like Pythagoras becomes triangle guy, and then this leads me to another problem, which is we actually never really see him do anything with triangles. He never like solves any like triangle based problems or like uses his triangle knowledge. This is maybe asking a bit much to like how many triangle based conundrums can we put our heroes into, but like. And also, Pythagoras sort of, in real life, as Liv was kind of alluding to, was kind of like this spiritual philosopher kind of guru type, where he had, he was really into like numerology, and actually like the theorem, which we attribute to him about, right triangles and a squared, b squared, c squared, is like a very small part of like kind of what he was known for in the ancient world and what he did, and what he did. But yeah, like this Pythagoras is just kind of like triangle guy in a way that, and yeah, but like why not Daedalus? Because like Daedalus shows up later in the show. He's in the show, or like, yeah, I like the decision to go with Pythagoras is interesting, and I think it's really just to like tickle, like Eli was saying, the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, so you can like point at the screen and be like, that's a name I've heard.
It's a touchstone because we literally all had to take 8th grade math and do the Pythagorean theorem, like everyone, and that's literally like why they show him. It's like, all right, his name's Pythagoras, you see him drawing triangles, we have established who this is, and now he's just here to solve problems occasionally, and that checks out. Also, I think Plato would have been insufferable in this.
I mean, he would have been the worst.
I do agree, though, that Plato would have done a very similar thing, where you've finger pointed, been like, I know that name, and maybe you didn't know anything other than that. But I feel like, we don't necessarily have to know what the Pythagorean theorem is to be like, I get it.
Yeah, that's the thing. You just need like one. I mean, if they wanted some kind of guy who was going to use his brains, like that, I understand that that's the role he plays, right? Like he, Hercules is a interesting take on Hercules that I do quite enjoy. Also, Mark Addy's wonderful, but you need that. You need the Hercules. You want a guy with brains, and then you have Jason who doesn't know quite what's going on. And so it's like Plato would have worked, and then it would have at least alluded to the fact that like maybe they had done a cursory Google of what Atlantis is in the actual Greek sourcing before they made this show. But then I'm just so curious about the Pythagoras, because I have the same questions about Odyssey picking it up with him. And it's all weird because Atlantis is just such a bizarre, nonsensical.
And like in Odyssey, it's kind of alluding to like Pythagoras as this kind of mystic, because he's kind of a sort of pseudo historical character. Like we have a rough estimate of when he would have lived, and he probably was a real guy, though what exactly he did and did not do or say or think or write or whatever is a little bit up to debate. And so he kind of fits that role nicely in AC Odyssey as this kind of like semi-mystical, spiritual, but also one foot in the historical.
And he's like 200 years old. So they have that. And
yeah, because he's like the keeper of the staff the alien, artifact that lets him live forever and do all this other stuff. In there, AC Odyssey is kind of rubbing shoulders with a lot of the sort of the theories and beliefs and conspiracies that sort of plague Atlantis stuff about ancient aliens and that kind of thing, which this show doesn't do it all. Like Atlantis is really just kind of like a catch-all basin for all things. Like every myth you've ever heard just happened in Atlantis.
It does do one thing if you're watching subtitles. Like anytime someone is chanting in the foreign language, which I don't think is Greek, it's subtitles as alien language, not foreign, but alien.
Oh, I notice that every time. I'm glad you did too. Like, why alien?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was sort of the odd thing. And maybe it's because like the word foreign is kind of inherently like, you know, to describe that. But it could have just been ancient language in like unknown ancient language, anything, but alien was definitely weird.
Unintelligible would have gone well.
Yeah, anything, just like language in another language, whatever. But I'm very glad that they didn't play on any of the bad Atlantis tropes, you know. It's not highly technologically evolved. There's none of that nonsense that comes from, you know, the like spiritualist people that took on Atlantis in the past like 500 years. It's literally just like, we know that people know this name and they associate it with ancient Greece. So let's do it. So, I mean, that alone is at least something. But I just can't get over, like, you know, I quite enjoyed the way they do it, just I think comparatively to everything else I've ever seen. It's just so garbagey. But all of that could have happened on Crete. Like they could have just made Crete where all these mythical things happened, because it's so clearly like the city itself is Knossos, like obviously it's Minos and Pasiphae and Ariadne and the Minotaur, and you're like, this is Knossos. So why not just keep it to an ancient mythological whole world and just make it Knossos? And like Hercules can be on Knossos, that's fine. Pythagoras can be on Knossos. Like there's no reason for any of this, and it would have made it so much more mythologically enjoyable for them to not just perpetually using this word Atlantis.
Would you have kept the like framing device, like Jason is a modern guy sent back in the past, or we have scrapped
I think
that?
it works. And here's the thing, I also have like kind of a love for that idea, because I think it's an interesting way of examining any of these stories. Like full disclosure, like 15 years ago, I wrote a novel that is really like not similar to this, but is similar in the way of like somebody from our time going back. Because I think it opens up a lot of really interesting ways of examining that world, examining it like in good and bad ways. Like in my case, I think it would be really interesting to look at a woman going back, because like there's so much there. But in this case, it just sort of, it does serve to like explain a lot of things. It serves to have like the, you know, the first episode, he's like, wait, the Minotaur is real, which I realize I just pronounced it like I do, but I really do prefer Minotaur. But he's like, right? And okay, this is a question from like, I don't know Greek, but the sound I is not really in the modern Greek language, at least, right? So is Minotaur, that sounds more correct. Anyone have any strong feelings about this? I could be.
In modern, it would be me, like that letter would be an E sound.
Yeah.
And in ancient, it probably wouldn't something comparable, maybe a little more back.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have been like I.
Mine. No, it wouldn't have been the Minotaur. That's a very British.
I've found myself like I was in Crete with a person who lives in the UK and has taken it on, and I was like, I'm just gonna tell you, like I'm pretty sure it's Minotaur, because I'm pretty sure ancient Greek and modern Greek don't have the I sound in the same way. So like weird feelings about this stuff. Apologies, but yeah, I think where I was, how that all devolved was just, I wish it had just been said on Crete.
I think I agree with that.
I will say, so when they're speaking unintelligible, it didn't sound ancient Greek or Greek to me. So they're just saying stuff. But I nerded out, you guys, when they went to see Daedalus. That script was linear B. And I paused it
Chris
and I wrote it down to be like,
oh my God,
it actually saying something?
Yes.
And it's not.
I knew that it was linear B, but I like didn't. Christy, I love you. It's incredible.
This makes me very happy.
I tried, and I'm like, and he kept talking about hope. So I'm like, all right, if you have hope as written in the Hesiod, it's Eplis. And I have all the signs for that. I'm like, okay, they're not using that. And then like more recent, it'd be Elpida. And like that one's closer to what's kind of in here, but it's just a giant word scramble of random symbols. And so like I literally spent probably a half hour first pausing and like writing down the script both frontwards and backwards, because they pulled a damn Da Vinci on it. And I'm like, I don't know which way these characters go. And
I love this so
it is
much.
pure nonsense, but it is linear B pure nonsense, which I kind of appreciate.
See,
Amazing.
and if they'd made this Crete and then had put Linear B in it and had just continued to say it was Crete, that would have been so much better. Like it adds so much more actual like intelligent like depth of the story. If it had just been Crete and they're showing Daedalus with Linear B, that's lovely.
Yep.
Even on the sort of like set dressing and costuming and things like that, it's more classically inspired than really like Bronze Age inspired. Like the palace doesn't necessarily look especially like Knossos as we reconstructed with like those sort of, how would you describe them? Like
It looks
Inverted
Roman
columns.
sometimes.
yeah, skinny at the bottom,
Yeah.
big at fat at the top.
Yeah, it's very like Roman or even later. Like they did not even pull the
Mhm.
classical.
Their swords are straight up like Roman swords that you could get at like a costuming or like if you were like a cosplayer or something like that.
Yep.
You know, so there's that. It's all very sort of suggestive of the ancient world, but I think again, like this show's approach is very surface level, right? Like we're just gonna have a name you recognize, and then that's as deep as we're gonna go with it in terms of like thinking about it. And I think that it extends to the setting and the costuming. And, you know, because everyone's wearing pants, which is probably was my biggest complaint about the whole thing.
That didn't even occur to me. But see, that's all so true. And then you toss in them using Linear B, though, and then I go like, who are the different people that care and don't care? Because somebody cared a lot to put in Linear B. Somebody really cared. And then, yeah, the people who are putting them in pants or just generally the set. I mean, there's no polychromy, too. It's like the most beige set.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's just interesting the things that they went deep on, and I think that might be just Linear B. But I'm interested to think of like who made certain decisions, because that's so deep to go to Linear B, but then not even like have your set painted, let alone any kind of like ancient pre-Roman architecture.
My other favorite thing that like got me every time was the episode about the Pancration tournament. And they're all like, there's no rules. I'm like, there's 2 rules. We know exactly that there are 2 rules to the Pancration.
I was going to ask this because I was like, my knowledge of the Pancration is exclusively based in AC Odyssey, which is a lot of my historical knowledge, which is not great. So please explain an actual like ancient Pancration.
No eye gouging and no biting, but like anything else perfectly acceptable unless you're in Sparta where everything goes apparently.
There's also, I think it's important to say, there's no knife involved normally. We're like in the show,
there's
it's like
a
Okay.
It's just like more of an
The duel
MMA.
to draw first blood is very British invention for sure.
Yes.
Yes.
It felt like they wanted gladiators. Like it felt like they wanted to have a gladiator competition, and they were like, let's call it the Pancration because we know that's.
I mean, in the same thing, there was a whole episode about bull leaping, which very much felt like a gladiator. You know, they're in like an arena. I mean, they looked like they were in Madrid, but
at least that's
that
Crete.
one got me.
Exactly, yes. The jumping was great, though. Like,
yeah.
through the air and falling down.
Just the faces. Like I had to stop and take pictures.
Yes. I think Hercules was my favorite in that one.
He's wonderful. I just love that the woman that helped them, they named her Elpis. So they were like, she's our hope. That's cute. We're going to hope somebody gets this.
It was good.
Should we talk about Hercules?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about Hercules.
And then Bruno.
I will say, he was bugging me for the longest time trying to figure out who he was. And like, I know you mentioned another show he was in, but I realized he's from Knight's Tale.
Knight's Tale. I was going to like, yeah, I feel like we're all of a good age for my Scream answer. Really wanted to just scream Knight's Tale at you there. Yeah, that's his best.
I literally stopped watching Atlantis and watched A Knight's Tale like last night because I was like, I want really good Mark Addy.
Mark Addy gets first billed in the credits in the show. I mean, he also is like very much, he's really the lead of the show. I would argue that he probably gets more dialogue and screen time than Jason does.
Jason's there to take his shirt off. That's all we're here for.
Mm-hmm. I hope Jack Donnelly's listening to this.
Did you know who he's married to? Malin Ackerman.
Is he really?
Yes, I googled him because I was like, I recognize you, but I couldn't figure out what I recognized him from, except that he's married to Malin Ackerman. And I was like, holy shit.
Whoa.
My other realization was Aeson, the father of Jason. That's Jonathan from The Mummy.
That's John Hannah, yeah.
Oh, I haven't gone to John Hannah yet. I'm so excited. Yeah. Oh, I love John Hannah.
There's a lot. This whole show is a who's who of like British character actors because we got Alexander Siddig, if you're a Star Trek fan. In the second season, Anya Taylor-Joy shows up. She's the new Oracle.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Who else? Oh, I was going to say our our boy, Vincent Reagan, who I think I wrote we should make the mascot of this podcast because I think of any actor, he showed up in the most things we've reviewed. So Vincent Reagan's in the second season. He's like a general, but he's like the second in command in 300. He's the king in the new Clash of the Titans. He's in Troy. He's also like the second in command in Troy. So I think he's hit, like, we've reviewed at least like 5 things with this actor in it. But circling back around, Hercules, a very different take.
I like this Hercules.
I loved it.
Yeah. I don't know, they keep calling him like older and like over the hill, but he doesn't look that old, I guess. And he at one point admits, it's like, I never actually did any of those things. Like, I invented the whole story, which I kind of love. And it's just, he's like just a wild character, but he's also, you know, a grumpy roommate. And I feel like that's exactly what Hercules would be. A terrible roommate.
A lush, a gambler.
Yeah.
Womanizer.
A degenerate liar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of these things are they're not Hercules.
They're not Hercules. Yeah.
And when he does have to do something, he brute forces it.
Yeah. He's just like, punch it until it's better.
Very Hercules.
In the beginning, he's very much like, basically in the first couple episodes, he's pretty much just like a vehicle for like fat jokes. And then he gets a lot more sort of fleshed out in the later season, particularly with the entrance of Medusa. And then in the second season, he's much more like capable and involved, where like in the first couple of episodes of season 1, he's just kind of like a complete liability, a bit of a coward, and among other things.
Which seems wholly accurate for his character, all things considered. Like, when Hercules is not fighting a monster, he is his own worst enemy in about every other setting you can imagine.
Yeah, his whole like the whole conceit in mythology that he's, you know, even though he like paves the way for people to settle and live civilized lives, set up cities, things like that, live safely, he can't exist inside settled society the way regular people can, because he's too much of everything. He's too violent. He's prone to violence and madness. You know, if he hangs around too long, someone ends up dying, usually those closest to him. And so, like, yeah, he kind of can't. He's ill-suited to the world he kind of paves the way for.
Just today, I released an episode with your past guest, Amy Pistone, about the Trachiniae, where she basically says like all of that in the best way of just, yeah, he can't exist in regular like human life. His whole, you know, the whole prophecy that leads to his death is that, you know, either he'll die or his labors will come to an end, and the trick is his labors can never come to an end unless he's dead, and just all those different things about him. And I think the way they use him as like a light and fun character is nice, because you get kind of the similar Heraclean things, but you don't get the PTSD and the like just darkness that's associated with him, because he's kind of like, no, I didn't do all of that. So he's kind of like, he is Heracles, but he also didn't have to deal with all of the most horrific stuff that the actual mythological character did that like fucked him up so bad.
Yeah, which is an interesting, if we're just even thinking about like myth characters, is an interesting juxtaposition with Jason, because Jason, particularly as he's presented in Apollonius, where he's kind of the new hero, but he's like suave and smooth, and he prefers sort of talking and negotiating and wooing and seducing, but like he's very much not like Hercules. And in this, like it's maybe not reversed, but there is, you know, Jason is the action man and the everyman and the capable physical one, whereas Hercules is like the swindler, maybe, for lack of a better word.
Meanwhile, yeah, I mean, Jason in myth is just totally useless. Like he's, you know, in like Apollonius, he's not the absolute worst, but like he still doesn't do anything. You know, he's just like in charge, but he doesn't do anything.
He's barely even in charge, because he's only in charge because Heracles cedes the floor to him, basically. Right?
Well, and because he's like got Hera's favor, but that's it. It's like he's in charge because the gods want him in charge, and literally no other reason, because he doesn't do anything. Soon as he finds Medea, he's like, sick, somebody to do everything for me. Let's just like make that happen. Like I have a lot of ongoing arguments on my show and in my general life about who is worse out of Jason and Theseus, and I always stand by Theseus being worse, because Jason is much more benign. Like Jason's bad is just that he's a like useless human who uses Medea and then throws her aside, much to his own sort of lifetime demise. But Theseus is like outwardly bad, like outwardly awful, whereas Jason, he's just a when did someone a guest, I'm going to say her name right, Anwen Kaya Hayward, she described him as like a wet dishcloth or something, just like he's just nothing. He's just absolutely nothing. And so I think that's why I like this made up Jason so much more, because he's like a nice guy who wants to help, and he's not using everyone for his own gain, and look, he actually likes this nice lady. Oh, how endearing.
Another like maybe interesting like not intertext or like a read, because in the show Jason, they're kind of setting up that Jason in the show is like the one person who actually might be like descended from or affected by the gods, which is why he's got sort of near superhuman abilities, which is also a funny comparison because among the sort of gallery of heroes we get from ancient Greece, Jason is one of the few that actually has like little to no divine connection. He's not the child of a god. He has the favor of Hera, which is interesting in and of itself because of how kind of unique that is. But yeah, he's royal, but he doesn't have any sort of divine lineage that most other heroes usually have. That's pretty immediate. Whereas in the show, it's the opposite. He actually is the one who seems to be kind of divinely touched.
I would have loved to be in the writer's room.
Yes. And this is where I feel like my questions of like audience kind of come in, because there is a version of this show that could go pretty dark, that like could have Hercules as like this very, PTSD, overwhelmed, like not a nice guy, and I don't know, could have Pythagoras being weirder than he is, and could have Jason not like trying to do the right thing and being a nice guy. I feel like there is a version of telling this type of story that does delve into the darker aspects of this. And I'm like,
Eli has sort of an answer, I think, but it's a little bit of like backstory on the writer. So this show was created by the producers, Captain Murphy, who created Merlin, which was, I don't know if you ever saw that, but it was a BBC
I
show.
literally said that out loud. I was like, this reminds me of Merlin.
Yeah.
I said that to people.
Yeah, so it has the same tone, and it was designed to fit the same time slot, which is like also particularly why the sort of tone is where it's at this time slot that's, I think, for more younger audiences, so it has that more kind of like jokey, lighthearted, like PG-ish, if we were to give it like an American rating. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And in the second season, it moved back a slot, so it moves to a later time slot, and then, which also corresponds with the show becomes a little bit darker. There's a lot more blood, a lot more violence. There's sort of darker kind of subplots and tones. Like, and Jason, I think like there's a subplot where Jason kind of like just starts straight up murdering people.
All right.
And
I gotta keep watching.
I know. I was like, I guess I need to watch season 2.
Yeah.
So it kind of pivots into, and I think it was like, because also the other creator was Howard Overman, who created Misfits, was one of the key writers on a lot of episodes.
That is darker. Okay.
And in the second season, his name comes up a lot more in I think the writing credits.
Interesting.
It feels very BBC as well. Like I know BBC can do a lot of different things, but at the same, it just still feels like it. I never got too deep into Troy Fall of a City because the United Kingdom of it all I was like, I can't get into this. This is so deeply not the Mediterranean. I'm done. And from what I remember, it feels similar to that too, where it's just like very regionally British accents performing in a ostensibly Mediterranean world. And, I feel like it has a similar vibe even to like Doctor Who. It's just like, it's fun. It's kind of like, what's the word I want? Like, it's just, I don't know. It's very British. It's just like all it is.
Yes.
It also has very much the aesthetic. Like, I don't remember watching these much as a kid, but like Xenon Warrior Princess or Young Hercules, like it just reminds me of that so much in terms of maybe its production value and
like the costuming, the tone, the kind of like, I feel like they would have a scene where there's like a and then somebody like falls from a great height into like a pile of hay right in front of the main characters. Like, I don't think that actually happened, but it kind of also happens every episode.
Exactly. Yeah. And does it just mean that I am like a very jaded person in that this very like homey, wonderful, delightful show made me bored? Is that just me?
No, I got bored a lot. I think it's not binge worthy. Like, it is, you can enjoy episodes for the silliness or like the Easter eggs. Like there's so many Easter egg components that does make it really fun.
Yes.
But if you're trying to watch one after the other, you're like, the interactions between the three main characters and like Ariadne and Pasiphae are like always the same, just with like a slightly different end goal that gets solved at the end of the episode. So like it's repetitive in a lot of ways.
It very much was like a bit of a chore for me to get through, and I didn't get as far into season 2, partially because I definitely like jumped over and was watching other shows that were binge worthy. And it's interesting because it came out on network, it came out on the BBC, it was canceled after we're sort of partway through its second season, so we'll never exactly see, you know, they had plans for a season 3 that was going to feature the Argo, but you know, won't be.
It was going to make more sense.
Yeah, and this was also like, I'm trying to cast my mind back, as like 2013 is really I would say the beginning of a lot of the streaming services and like the early stages of like streaming wars, and like Game of Thrones is now kind of a thing, and just like the tone of a lot of shows are like going toward in that direction, whereas like this show compared to something like Vikings or The Last Kingdom, and where those shows kind of really took off in a way that this one, you know, and maybe it never quite found its audience. There's other sort of restrictions. The budget was a bit high, which is ultimately why it got canceled. It wasn't so it's harder to be on like a network show versus like when you have a streaming service, you can, you know, do kind of whatever you want, and then you'll either find your audience or you won't, or, you know, the audience comes to you. But when you're sort of debuting sort of every Thursday at 8 p.m. or whenever it is, you know, that's like this extra hurdle that goes in. So I think it's very interesting in like history and development of like TV.
Yeah, because it does sort of seem like a show from a bygone time almost, which is maybe why I was always so surprised that it was 2013, because I don't think of shows like this existing then.
Yeah.
It feels much
It still has a very sitcom model to it when it also is wanting to have a grander narrative, and it just kind of gets stuck between the two, it feels like.
Yeah, it's more episodic than not. It's like maybe if the show came out in 2006 or something like that, or 2002, it might have been a lot bigger. But I think like in and of its time, it maybe was sort of. I'm trying to work in like a classical illusion. It was like Ennius, whose poetry is sort of old and hoary by the time hoary HOARY, not the other kind.
The best word because you have to spell it in order for it to make sense.
Yeah, and the only reason I use it is because like that's just the word that always comes up, and it's like shaggy and old compared to like slick new Virgil or something like that.
I love it.
Yeah, all I want in the world is a dark and gritty and mythologically accurate, like bingeable TV show.
What myth would you want to focus on?
Oh, God, that's a good question. I feel like now, just by even watching this, like I do think focusing on Crete, but calling it Crete would be very good, because Crete is just sort of like this world of its own, and it has so many myths. I don't want to focus on Theseus, but like I guess if we had to, and maybe we make him not awful.
Or make him really awful.
Make him awful. Make him the worst.
True. Yeah. Dionysus comes in and like fucks it up, maybe. I don't know. The only like hero I really have any kind of time for is Cadmus, but then he has very few stories associated with him, which I think is why he ends up being not awful, because he doesn't have time. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like making it a dark and gritty show about the Argo, like the whole Argonautica, would be very good if you did it right. Like if you have the whole lead up and like a lot of really dark stuff happening, and then you meet Medea and she solves all the problems in a kind of like not anti-hero, but like the what they do with TV now, where it's like she's not going to be perfect, she's going to be dark, she's going to be murderous, but also you're still going to love her, kind of thing, like that could be done.
You're going to get why, I think, because that's like what I like so much about Apollonius is because he's got in mind the Euripides play of like, we know where Medea's gonna end up kind of, but we're gonna see like the lies that Jason tells her, the choice, everything she puts on the line and sacrifices for him, which is like when she has her turn, it makes sense and is empathizable.
Yeah, Apollonius' Medea is amazing. Like just even all of that in like some dark and gritty show would be great. You just have like a little touch of Heracles and then he's gone, but he gets to have like this moment with Hylas. Like that would be cool.
That would be
now
great.
I'm in on this. I want a dark and gritty Argonautica right now.
I think that could be very cool.
That would be really fun.
I'll also add, we'd be remiss, the myth I sort of want to come back to, and a character we haven't talked about, but we absolutely need to is Medusa in the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I haven't gotten to anything happening to her, so please tell me and then let's talk.
How are you?
Okay.
Are you okay with being spoiled?
Yeah, please spoil away. I'm going to watch it anyway because I should also say when we were talking about people not getting bored, I definitely would have gotten bored. I was also doing something at the same time, which is I think the only way that I could enjoy it is like finding the right thing to do where I'm paying just enough attention while also keeping my attention elsewhere, because that's also my ADHD at work. So it was like the perfect background show that I was still paying attention to, but it was not taking up all my attention because I would not have handled it.
I understand completely. Yes. I will crochet sometimes.
Yeah. The only problem I was having is there would be these short little characters like Bakis would show up and I'm like, who the hell is that? And then they're gone and I never see them again. I'm like, okay, I guess they weren't important. The only one that was important was Cyrus, the thief from the bull leaping episode, who was murdered, and then he comes back to guide them through the underworld. So I'm like, I remembered who you were at least.
Ooh.
To sacrifice himself again.
Again.
Yeah.
Just because that was my question. At the end, they leave the underworld. I was like, is Cyrus just getting like ripped apart by ghouls down in Tartarus? For, like,
Is it also
eternity?
because he was racist in his first showing because of like what he kept saying about?
But he overcame
his
that,
teammate.
right? That was what happened.
Right?
That was
became
his
a
arc.
team. They overcame their differences.
Oh, I have one other thing to say before we get to Medusa, and it's like, I think Pythagoras was a budding archaeologist because he's like, oh, look, it's a shard. It's a piece of broken pottery, and let's collect the pieces and put it back together. And then
He
has
does.
to
He
go.
reassembles it. He's like, I think it's a pig.
Just even the way he said shard like that, you're like,
Yeah. It's delightful. I love it.
Yeah, I just had to say that. I'm like, Pythagoras is a budding archaeologist, and he doesn't even know it. Like, take a break from triangles,
Canon.
man. Actually, ironically, we use the Pythagorean theorem to lay out excavation grids.
Yeah, I was like, you don't have to leave it behind. Bring it with you.
You don't.
There you go.
You are born to be an archaeologist, man. Okay, I got that out. I had to say that about Pythagoras, and now we can give Medusa our full attention, which I think we need to unpack with, like, one thing that was upsetting to me is, like, I actually really liked how they did Medusa, but I got so upset of how so many of the women were done in this show overall. So Medusa was a plus, so let's definitely start there, and then we can talk about, like, Pasiphae and Ariadne in particular is kind of what I'm leaning towards.
Medusa, so she's introduced in an episode where they rescue her on one of their adventures involving maenads and satyrs, which in this world are like kind of weird monkey people. And
That was weird.
so then she kind of becomes she's sort of a love interest with Hercules. And then eventually for some reason, they need to go get Pandora's box. And for some reason, again, she kind of looks into, I have sort of like notes on the show, but she looks in the box because of, like, again, like in an allusion, I guess, to Pandora, where like curiosity overcomes her, but that she looks in the box for a reason and then is cursed with snake hair. And then she goes and like exiles herself into a cave. In the second season, she comes back, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but we get the sort of the more Medusa-y stories we're thinking about, and like the iconography involving her head. But that's kind of, so she's this sort of cursed, she's like, I guess maybe a tragic heroine.
Are you telling me they behead her? I'm going to be very upset if that is the case.
Yes, they do. And you're not going to like it. You're not going to like it.
Well, I'm a little upset because I like that
season 2 is dead to me now.
yeah, I don't think I can watch that.
She starts off great because she kind of like rescues herself in so many ways. Like she had wax in her ears, so she wasn't like being hypnotized, and she's like ready to like do the thing, and she's running with everybody. And yeah, she doesn't seem to be a passive character. She like has a lot of opinions, and at some point like gets really pissed at Hercules for trying to enchant her with like a love spell, and like refuses to talk to him, and like is like an opinionated real character. So I was I was sad that looking in Pandora's box is what snakified her. I was like, really? Like, okay. I get, like, I didn't want anything bad to happen to her, but like it felt, I don't know.
Especially if it's like the curiosity.
Yeah.
I thought it was the result. Okay, because like Pandora's box, because I was obsessed with the linear B, I got very distracted over like what happened exactly. So I thought part of what happened to Medusa was like because Hercules had gone to Circe to get the love potion, and then like he was supposed to pay back with the thing most precious to him, which was a subplot. And then I thought because he hadn't paid Circe back, like he did something that got Medusa into that form.
I actually like that version better.
Yeah, that's much better.
Right? Okay, that was what was happening in my head. I didn't realize she'd looked in Pandora's box. So
the curiosity thing
I
in
like that
general
better.
too is such like a bummer of one of those things that's taken hold of mythology, even though it's not really in the sources. Like it's the idea that we blame women when the sourcing. I've done a whole episode on Pandora for this reason, but like there's nothing about curiosity. She opens it because she was always going to open it because the gods wanted her to open it because they wanted the evils out. Like it wasn't about a woman's curiosity. It was just about like that was going to happen. Like it just had to happen. It was the whole point of the whole plot. And then so yeah, to take hold of the curiosity and use it again, it's like ugh.
It's kind of us like retrojecting an Adam and Eve kind of situation back onto Pandora.
Exactly. Yeah, for all the misogynist reasons of like, oh, ladies' curiosity. It's really troubling when they like care to know about things.
So they do this thing with Pandora's box where it's kind of like the One Ring or something where it like whispers to you and it's like, open me, look at me. And like, so they're kind of like, don't look in the box. I'm a serious professional. In the episode, kind of what happens is like, they rescue Medea from these thugs that had kidnapped her, and they're like fighting the thugs, and she runs back to the apartment where they've stashed the box in their like secret floor compartment, and she like hears the whispers and like finds the box and just looks in it, and which is like my greatest grievance is that it's sort of not set up in any way that would make sense why they just like, oh yeah, the box is, alluring to people. But like, it's nothing particular to Medusa of like, they didn't set up of like, she would be the kind of person that would either be mistrusting or suspicious or curious or whatever, like any reason that she would have, like why she would look in the box versus anyone else.
Also, what happened to the lock on it that Daedalus put on? Did it just go away?
I think that was after. No, because that's when they go to Daedalus, it's to try to figure out a cure for Medusa. So she's already looked in it.
Okay. Okay, you're right. Okay. I lost
my
track,
thought,
obviously.
If I was in the writer's room, which obviously I wasn't, and maybe shouldn't have been, but like, my thought is if I were to change it, is she would have always been a Gorgon, and that she was keeping her Gorgonness on the DL, and then it's revealed later that she's like, I don't know, got some kind of spell or something that like hides it, but then
love that
she's actually been a Gorgon this. Yeah, which is also a little bit, I'm taking a page from one of my favorite Medusa depictions, which is in an episode of the Disney Hercules TV show, where she like disguises herself as a human so she can like go to prom and like and make friends basically.
How do they deal with the whole eye thing though?
Sunglasses?
Because apparently Jason's just immune.
No, Jason used his knowledge of like the shield to like look in the shield to talk to Medusa. That's what he says to Hercules. He's like, you can only look at her reflection. Here's a shield. He was using his knowledge.
His modern
his
knowledge.
Foreknowledge. Yeah.
My answer to that, Chrissy, would be the spell, whatever spell she gets that makes her sort of look like a not Gorgon would just repress her Gorgon powers. But then it wears off and then it's a whole accident and she's like accidentally turning people to stone or something like that. And then there's, confusion and...
Oh, the better Cinderella. Gotcha.
Disney's Hercules is... like the TV show, I have not rewatched all of it, like from before, when I was a child and watching it when it was on TV. But like I rewatched a chunk of it for a while, and it goes into so many myths and like deep cut accurate myths. That show is underrated and ridiculous.
I think, yeah, it has a shoestring budget, but I think it is one of the better bits of classical reception out there. If
you look at the cast list, your mind explodes into a trillion different pieces. Like every single actor you have ever heard of from the 90s is in the Disney's Hercules TV show. All of them.
I'm looking this up right now.
I truly, like, all to say, like, I did a lot of watching of Disney's Hercules and scrolling through that, like, IMDb, and it's wild.
Sandra Bernhard? Oh my god.
Everyone is in it except Danny DeVito because somehow he didn't come back to play his role from the movie. And then
how could he not come back to Philoctetes?
It's like everyone from Seinfeld, I'm pretty sure everyone from Friends, like every major actor of the 1990s is in this show.
Oh, that's right, because Lisa Kudrow's Aphrodite. I distinctly remember this.
Truly everyone. It's incredible.
That's great.
I'm so happy.
All I know is that it fed into this idea that I've had some students come to class and be like, "Oh, the Spartans worshipped Ares." And I'm like, "No, all of the Greeks hated Ares for the most part." Like, they have in the Iliad that, like, he's the most hated of all the gods.
His dad
Yeah.
says that to him too.
Yeah.
I love it.
And but, like, this one kid was really insistent, and I'm like, "I mean, you show me the original Greek source on it, and I will accept it." And, like, that kid never came back with anything.
I want to hear, like,
So
the most exciting thing to me for that is, like, this must have been a young person discovering this very 1990s TV show, whereas, like, I don't know about you guys, but, like, I was born in the late 80s, so, like, it was on when I was, like, 10, 11, so it was ideal. But if you're
Yep.
teaching somebody who was, like, learning from it, that means they
I
discovered
don't
it very
understand where
late.
that concept comes from of, like, Sparta worshipped Ares, like, and then someone pointed out on Twitter, like, that was very well established in that TV show because Heracles and his schoolmates, Cassandra and Icarus, are, like, from the school where Athena's their mascot, and then they have their rivalry school is from Sparta, and Ares is their mascot. So, like, I think it
That's
fed into that
spectacular.
idea.
Oh my god.
Ares is like this really like frumpy little god too, and then Hephaestus is like
Mhm.
big and buff, and like I love that juxtaposition too, which is super not like atypical, I would say. And it's great TV show. Not Atlantis, but it is a great TV show.
Well, and they're going to be coming out with a live action Disney's
Oh, yeah,
Hercules,
they
which
still-
I
they
am.
are. If they don't make the muses good, like it's all over. I
I
mean, if they don't
know.
make the muses what they are in the show or in the
How
cartoon, I would say.
Well, and that was Lizzo's
If Lizzo
Rumors.
is not one of the muses, yeah.
That was what her
Yes.
whole music video was about, was basically like,
Oh, yeah.
I should obviously be one of the muses
Which
for
like the whole
this-
world agrees with her.
Yeah. Oh,
100%.
wholehearted.
What if they got the Spice Girls as originally planned?
No.
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 If they make the muses white, like it's all over. No one's watching that.
No one needs that.
Like,
No one wants
truly,
to see that.
Truly, no one's watching it. Yeah.
I saw someone suggest that Ariana Grande should be Meg, and I'm like, is it just because of the high ponytail? Is that like literally the only thing you're
That's it.
basing that casting decision on?
Probably.
I mean, she can sing, I guess, too.
I have a larger, like, every time I see someone on the internet put, like, here's my fan casting of, like, whatever thing, you know, book, video game, whatever, I always get really frustrated because they fixate on, like, physical, like, you know, if the character is supposed to have red hair, they pick an actor with red hair or something like that. And I'm like, that's not the, like, the logic that should be informing your casting. It should, like, physical appearance should actually not be the thing that is sort of really you're focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
You're limiting yourself. All right, but I'll stop before because I'm about to like enter in like to like a stuttery nonsense kind of like just frothing.
All right. Should we bring it back to the women of Atlantis? And
Yes.
Yes.
Especially now
Sorry,
that I-
Christy.
now that I recognize how poor Medusa is, like, I really liked the idea of it being the fault of Hercules' actions, because again, that ties in pretty well with her myth of like, it's not really anything she did wrong. It is what Poseidon did to her that leads to this unfair punishment of her. And I kind of wish that's what they had done. And you had to spoil it for me, y'all. But anyway, I really liked her depiction, though, and also that she was very capable. She's sympathetic. She is someone who looks past, like, I like that too. Like, she looks past Hercules' appearance and like all the faults that his friends like to like put on him all the time. And she sees like the good heart he has, even if when he does mess up, and she holds him accountable when he messes up. So like the perception she has with her eyesight, and you could read into that a little bit. I think that's giving way too much credit to this very shallow show at the end of the day, but I liked all of those aspects of her a lot. Then on the flip side, you have Pasiphae and Ariadne, where Pasiphae is all of a sudden the stepmother. She's evil and conniving.
Mhm.
She is a witch.
She's Livia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's doing the Livia thing. Like she's just
She
slowly
is.
poisoning
Yeah.
her husband.
Yeah. Yeah. Without any good reason.
Like, I do like the connection. They've made her Cersei's sister, which she is, but
Yes.
so like the idea of her being a witch is not a stretch. It's not like explicit in the mythology, but it's not a stretch. But her being like conniving, evil, and a stepmother is like a deep and unnecessary stretch. Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Like if she was a good, or not even necessarily a good witch, but like a witch who was not pointlessly against her daughter for no reason and like pointlessly evil and all these things. Like Pacify's been done so dirty by mythology generally. Like the poor woman, every single thing in her life is a shit show and not because of anything she did. And then so to make her this evil is such a bummer. It's just so unnecessary.
This is not pertinent to the show necessarily, but did you have a thought on like Madeline Miller's Pacify? Because like in Cersei the book, she's very much this like she's just after glory. She's kind of like a mean stepsister. Like that's kind of her energy.
Yeah, it's not my favorite take. No. I think she's just, I think she's so sympathetic in the mythology that to make her anything else is unnecessary.
Yeah, again, in myth, she is a character punished for the actions of the men around her. Through no fault of her own.
Perpetually. Just endlessly. Yeah.
And then Ariadne is, on the flip side, kind of that just sort of very, I don't know, what's the word I'm searching for? She's a damsel in distress, basically. Like, I'm not sure.
She ends up being the most bland of all of the characters. It really feels like.
Which is so sad. No, I just like, I really love Ariadne's story in the myths because I feel like in some versions she gets like a best case scenario.
She really does, yeah.
Right? Like she gets to like hang out with Dionysus and like
dodges
fuck around
the Theseus bullet.
And,
like
yes, like really dodges that bullet. But
Yeah.
then like is immortalized, right? Like she in some versions becomes a goddess and like hell yeah, I'm so here for that. And like she at the very first episode she gives Jason like the little spool of thread. So like she does her one thing. But then she just like stands and stares out windows and like looks dramatic. She doesn't do anything else ever.
Gets messages and then never does anything effective with them.
Yeah, this is not me defending the show, but in the second season, there's a lot more Ariadne, where basically the kind of arc of the second season is she becomes queen, and then it becomes kind of this civil war struggle between her and Pacify for the throne, when then sometimes Ariadne's on top and sometimes Pacify's on top, and they kind of go back and forth. But again, I think very much in the same way that Pacify is kind of just doing Livia again from I, Claudius, which was at this point was like 50 years old. Ariadne, even in the second season, I think is just kind of following in the footsteps of other more popular TV shows that would have I'm thinking Game of Thrones, especially because I guess the shadow that show cast on TV in general is kind of inescapable.
And like women pitted against women is just so unnecessary too. Like that, you don't need it, especially in mythology where it's like the women have enough trouble in mythology without you unnecessarily making Pacify the villain and then setting her up to be against who is her daughter. They don't have any issues in the mythology. And it's so unnecessary. It really it takes away from any kind of stronger women characters to pit them against each other in a way that's like so against the actual ancient sourcing.
And Cersei feeds into that as well because she's just another example of that.
Yeah. My sister for okay, what?
That's her character basically.
Yeah.
And then Jason can't kill her, but then has no problem killing Cersei, and I'm like, what was the logic there?
Well,
they
get into this again, but I don't know, big spoilers, but do you know the twist at the end of the first season that I'm going to ruin for you?
Do it.
Which is that Jason is Pacify's son. And which is why he stops himself before he kills her, because a similar thing happens in the second season and he can't do it because he
knows it's molecular level.
Exactly. He intuits that which never stopped anyone in a myth, but
which is why I think also they had her be Ariadne's stepmom, because that means that Ariadne and Jason aren't related.
I am glad they did that, but also they didn't necessarily need to do that, as we saw that Oedipus is included in.
Yeah, right.
I would love the cliffhanger of that episode. I'm like, well, we all know how that's going to end, but we'll just let it go.
We'll just okie dokie.
There's a moral question that the show doesn't really get into, but Jason is faced with a moral conundrum where he's like, do I kill baby Oedipus? It's almost like a kill baby Hitler kind of thing, but
My very strong sense of Jason is like a student who has not come to my Greek Civ class, but a student who has wandered into my history turning points class, where I start them off with the Iliad, and people are like, I've heard of that name. I have no idea who they are. Like, Jason gives me that exact same energy of like, I know that name. I know bad things happen with that name.
Like, he's not a classicist. He just knows names. He's just like
No.
heard
Yeah.
vague things.
Yeah.
This is so my biggest question. What was Jason before Atlantis? Was he like a submariner? How does he know how to drive a submarine?
He's a marine biologist, obviously.
What
Nothing
else could
else
he
makes
be?
What was his dad? What were they doing? How does he just have access to a submarine? Why was his dad exploring underwater?
I don't know.
His dad was looking for Atlantis.
Obvious. And
Yeah,
the
probably was
wreckage of his dad's sub, his sub was named the Oracle, which I kind of liked.
It was either is the font called papyrus or an equally cliche font,
Yep,
and I
yep.
just stared at it and I was like, this is that font. You
terrible.
chose that font for your ship.
There's a great SNL skit where it's all about, I think it's like Ryan
the
Gosling. He
papyrus.
realized, yeah, where the font for the Avatar, or for James Cameron's Avatar poster, is just the papyrus font, and he's like, no, it's like you can't get away with it.
That's one of the best SNL skits of all time.
Oh my god. I have a really like stupid like complaint that isn't a real complaint.
We're at that part of the show.
Okay, are we there? Are we there?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're there.
I really hated how Jason could just speak everybody's language in
As
Atlantis.
soon as he first spoke, I was like, "This. I feel like you should explain something. I don't know what's going on here."
I almost knew you were gonna say that, Eli, because this is Eli's thing. Like,
This is my thing. Because I think like communication and like languages are interesting, and they like make very interesting conflicts among, you know, real human people who have to deal with this. And I think it would have been really fun if just the first episode was them like yelling at each other and not being able to understand, and he slowly learns ancient Greek, I guess.
Atlantean.
Atlantean.
Linear B.
he learns linear B, yeah.
Proto
Minoan?
ancient Greek.
That we still don't
Minoan?
know?
Something.
Maybe it's all Minoan. Maybe that's it. Because like linear A is a similar syllabary to linear B, but we just don't understand what linear A is. So maybe it's linear A.
So yeah, I think language barriers are fun and are interesting and human-focused conflicts that make for cool stories.
The
This has
problem
been
is
my
that
TED Talk.
in like Hollywood, they get boring within like an episode. I think
Exactly.
they would
It's
be
like,
startling.
you can't do that in a miniseries. It doesn't work.
Wasn't there like Babel was a movie that actually did that,
Oh, I did not see that.
more or less, with Brad Pitt being in it, and like it happens all over the world, so it's being done in all these different languages.
Okay.
I was
Interesting.
actually in Greece when I saw part of that, now that I think about it. So maybe I was even more confused because, yes, all of the subtext was in Greek. So I'm like, I have no idea what's going on with half this movie.
To
Ugh.
pull it right back to ridiculous hills to die on, apparently, my brain just concluded that the Oracle shipwreck is actually not in papyrus. It's in the font called Herculaneum.
Oh my god.
I knew it was an ancient font, and why my brain can recognize between the two. I could like picture it and I'm like, no, that's not papyrus. I remember looking at it and thinking, it's one of the cliches, but it's not papyrus.
I love it. I love it.
I will say my other favorite thing, because there's not much to say about the character King Minos, but what I love about King Minos is he has come up with every imaginable way relating to bulls to like sacrifice people to Poseidon, all held in his personal Colosseum.
Yep.
I am so confused about the whole bull leaping thing of like, what are the rules to this sport? Why are they like, are they like condemned prisoners, or are
You
they
get
like
a chance to
athletes?
train like gladiators, you as a team, and then your team goes in, and if one of you fails, you all die. But if all of you succeed in leaping over the bull by any means necessary, then Poseidon has had mercy on you and you walk free.
But they do the
Those are
very
the rules.
explicitly like the flips that you could like see from the wall paintings, because in the actual show it is absurd, their flips, and you're like, you're clearly trying to do something here.
Yeah, no.
I took stills from Hercules' leap because it was like pure
Yeah.
It's so
joy
good.
for a moment
It's
flying
so
through the air,
good.
Superman-y.
When Hercules leaps over that bull, he has
the-
like an 8-foot vertical jump. Like
I
he
know.
flies over that thing.
Oh, that one got to me so bad because every single leap over the bull was so ridiculous, and the facial expressions were just too good. Oh, that one got me. But
It's just
because we have the
beautiful.
Minotaur, we have the bull leaping, we have the Pancration, we have the brazen bull. I'm
Yep.
pretty sure there's more, but that's all that's coming to mind right now.
Yeah, a lot of bull
Which is
stuff.
why it should have just been set on
It
Crete.
should have just been Crete.
Really should have.
Yeah.
That's like the
Really.
title. The new title of the show is not
Crete.
Atlantis. It should have been set on Crete.
Everything about it is clearly Crete.
Yep.
Ugh.
And I think I don't know if I have any other like final thoughts unless anyone's got another like just hot take they want to get into.
I don't know about hot take, but I do want to ask what everyone's like favorite episode is. And then, but if there's a hot take, do the hot take.
Let me think.
All right, I got to look over my notes and refresh myself of what the episodes.
Mine
actually
is
all are.
actually the Oedipus one because it went into this direction of like actually the things that I always want to see more in these films is like what does it actually look like taking care of an infant in the ancient world? What toys do they have? How do you swaddle them? Where do you put them to bed? How do you feed them milk when like there's not a mother? And I loved all of that. I loved Hercules's interactions with the infant because it is kind of the first time we got more depth to him as a character, and it like again showed Medusa being very capable. And I actually really enjoyed it. It became almost like Full House all of a sudden. Like
Yeah.
I'm remembering that very first episode where it's 3 guys trying to figure out how to put a diaper on an
Yep.
infant. And I enjoyed it for like it's not well, it becomes high stakes like every episode does, but like so much of what was enjoyable was just like how do we take care of a baby in the ancient world when we're 3 dudes and we have no idea what we're doing, but we care about this
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
So I had 2 thoughts. Well, there was one, not my favorite episode, and I'll get into that in a second, but there was this one, on episode 5, I only have one note written down, which is in the very beginning of the episode when Hercules is like taking care of his champion dung beetle, he picks up poop off the ground with his bare hands to put in the jar, and then immediately with the same hand goes and picks up a loaf of bread. And that was like the only thing I could think about for the rest of that episode. Where I'm like, I just watched you touch like poop on the road with your hand and then immediately handle food. That the rest of the episode should have just been about everybody getting like dysentery and pink eye.
I loved the dung beetle so much.
That plot line was
And
more interesting than the other plot line in that episode, frankly.
I don't even I did not remember what episode it was in. I just remember how much I enjoyed their prize dung beetle that he carries around in a jar and like names, and it's like
Serious question, do dung beetles actually eat the dung or do they just use it for other stuff?
I don't want to be wrong. I don't know.
No idea.
They roll it.
I know,
Yeah.
I
They lay
thought they
their
like
eggs in
laid
it.
eggs in it.
They use it for
And
their
then, like,
mating thing.
And then in like the eggs, like when they hatch, maybe eat it? Question mark?
We'll get back to
Not important.
Yeah. Oh, it's important
Follow
to
up.
me.
Follow up on the dung beetle.
Yeah. But my actual favorite episode is episode 11, which is the werewolf episode, because I'm a sucker for all things werewolves, and I have all sorts of like little insights and gripes about, you know, why it should have been a myth about Lycaon and
I was
you know,
just
because
going
there's
to
a lot
ask
of
if it was
werewolf.
a myth about Lycaon.
No, it's Hecate in this one. It
Oh.
sort of just becomes a very generic werewolf story involving silver, which is not a thing you don't get in werewolf literature. My first ever thing published was about werewolves in ancient sources.
Amazing. I've done a lot of digging into that too. It's
Yeah,
good stuff.
I'm a big fan. So like I was bummed by a lot of missed opportunities, but it was a werewolf story, so in my book that immediately sort of ascends to like, you know, S tier.
I just like the end of it when Jason's like trying to recount like what he did while Ariadne was in, other than be naked in front of her, because he remembers that part. But then he's like,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, what'd you do? It can't be that bad. It's like, I slammed a door in her face. It's like, all lovers do that. This is Hercules. All lovers do that. That's fine. He's like, I think I sniffed her. I'm like, she probably didn't notice that. He's like, and then I growled, and Pythagoras, was it like a fun growl, like a "Arr?" And he's like, no, it was more like a "Arr." And they're like, yep,
I'm
you're
isolating
screwed.
that clip, Christy. My question's still like, why couldn't Ariadne find out? Like, would it have been a real deal breaker?
I
Like, I'm
don't
like,
understand. Yeah.
Like, yeah, he's cured now, right? Like, so it's like, it's fine.
it seems like a manufactured conflict that like Ariadne couldn't find out.
It's very sitcom-y again, and it doesn't make sense in the grand scheme of things. I was also just going to say, I don't know, if that man who had been naked in front of me growled that way, I don't know. I think maybe I'd still take it as a compliment if I was into him. That wouldn't be so bad. The door slamming would be problematic.
But he then opens the door, so it's fine.
I wish I had seen this episode. I'm ready for it now.
Right.
I think my favorite episode might be like 1 or maybe 12 or 13, where the heist, when they like try to get into the palace to kill Pacify. I love a good heist, as y'all know. And I just like how they're like, they plan all this stuff out, and then like Hercules and Pythagoras abandon Jason, and he like can't get back up the wall, and then he has to spend the night in Ariadne's bedroom, and it's like there's so much here, guys. There's so much. So it's delightful. But I also like the 5 minutes of modern day where you're just like, what is happening? So yeah, it's like one in the end are just really, really fun and delightful. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite just because I found myself rushing through them because I just didn't think I'd have enough time, which I definitely didn't. But I think maybe the Oedipus because that everything you said, Christy, is so interesting. But also, yeah, episode 1 was just like funny. Like from episode 1, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to handle watching all of this, but I'm going to do it. And then I think I got more into it because I needed the right thing to be doing at the same time for my own brain purposes. But the beginning in the modern world, the Herculaneum font on the sunken ship, just like him landing. I like how he lands, he's naked, he finds ancient clothing and ancient sandals on the beach, and there seems to be no indicator to him that like something's amiss. He has to actually get to an ancient city, and then he's like, wait, am I in ancient Greece? And it's like, sir, you were just under the sea. You saw a ship called the Oracle. A bunch of weird stuff happened, and then you found ancient clothing. Like, I know that time travel is not like the first assumption, but like, come on, like we've all watched enough TV. Like you should have gotten it earlier. And there's just like a few moments, or like him meeting Pythagoras is so silly. Triangles and oh my god, you're Hercules, and it's just like, yeah, maybe the first episode just. It sets so much up in such a way where you're like, oh, this is the type of show I'm going to be watching. Okay, cool.
Exactly.
this is what it is.
A good piece of art teaches you how to watch it in its first whatever.
There you go. It did that.
Yep. It really did.
All I know is the other thing that happened a lot was the choice of slow motion action in different running, chase, or fight scenes. And every time it happened, the song Slow Motion for Me, Slow Motion, like just kept coming into my head. I'm like, why is this happening all the time? Why? Bad CGI. Okay. And the combination of good CGI and bad CGI, because we did have a Harryhausen moment at the very last episode too. Or no, when Circe is killed and we get the skeletons.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I'm like, those are really good looking skeleton fight happening there.
Right.
And then other times the CGI is so bad.
The bull leaping.
The bull leaping.
I don't know, that was technologically incredible, I think.
They just had way too much fun with the CGI was my fun, and slow
not
motion.
Enough budget.
And not enough budget.
It's like you could have saved
too much
money
fun.
here, people.
Like at the beginning in the Minotaur, they really set it up like they weren't going to show him, like they were going to do the all the suspense based on that. And I was like, this is great. This is the right call when you have a low budget. Like work your suspense based off not showing the thing. Like horror movies have proven that is like really good use of like a lack of budget or technology. And then they were like, nah, we're going to show it and it's going to be kind of weird.
Like, okay. And then after you kill it, it's going to turn just into some guy.
Just some dude. Yeah, like the myth says.
Yeah. No, the choice of how a bunch of different creatures got depicted in CGI, like the satyrs. How do they say it? The satyrs?
What were they? Oh, yeah, and they said it weird, and then they were the most bizarre creatures. Satyrs, I think they said.
Satyrs,
that's not what you think it means. Like, that's not... No.
And
Yeah.
what was it when the thing guarding Pandora's box?
Oh,
I don't even know what that was.
Campy. It was a very Harryhausen-esque kind of monster. Like, it's
Yeah,
just
it was a
sort of
scorpion womanish lady thing. Something I would fight in Heroes of Might and Magic. I don't know.
In the very first episode, he finds a dragon in the marketplace and kills it. And that I just like had forgotten that until you said that.
I totally forgot about that.
Yes, and it's super weird because it's like there's not just regularly dragons on the street in any other moment of the show. They're not introducing a place and a time when there are just tiny marketplace dragons. This thing was a two-headed, like traditional European dragon too, like explicitly not a Mediterranean style dragon. It's very like out of the like Britain mythology. And then he just kills it and starts running and doing the whole Aladdin thing. And I think I'd like completely forgotten that it happened. And yeah, truly, it was just an interesting choice. Like they clearly wanted to set up this like mythologizing this, like there are monsters in this world. So they're like, put it right in the beginning, even if it doesn't fit with the story we're going to tell you at all.
Like, because nothing comes of that.
No,
really. Like,
he just kills a dragon and he's like, I guess this means I'm in the ancient mythological world.
better go talk to the oracle.
Yeah, well, it's fine, Pythagoras.
Yeah. Well, I am really tempted to watch season 2 now. You guys.
I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. I'm going to be very upset with Medusa, but
Yeah, I'm mad.
I know.
Already.
Oh, yeah, and there's
No.
Medea too. Medea shows up in this season
Medea
2.
shows up.
Mm-hmm.
Is it good or bad?
I don't think I've seen enough of it to really say. I think she's kind of positioned as like the other woman / bad girl that kind of maybe comes between Jason and Ariadne.
Oh.
Something new
Like, you know,
for
she's
Medea.
kind of a villain. They maybe kind of bond. You know, there's a.
Okay.
I'm gonna watch it anyway.
Should we do our sign-offs?
Lovely.
All right.
I think so. As we blink.
Sorry. It takes me like 3 tries to get this.
I can't do anything scripted with other people. I'm with you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, for listening. I hope you enjoyed. I want to, again, thank Liv. It was really wonderful having you on the show. I hope you at least had some enjoyment. You know, forgive the chaos that is our sort of very hodgepodge, ramshackled.
That is what podcasts are for.
Yeah,
Like,
just the rambling idiocies of people with degrees.
I had so much fun. Thank you.
Excellent. And listeners can find you, of course, at your show, Let's Talk About Miss Baby. But where else can they find or read or listen of things from you?
Everywhere. I have a website. It's mythsbaby.com. Everything of mine is just Myths Baby. Thankfully, I thought ahead and grabbed it all. And then, yeah, I have a book coming out on April 12th. That is a very ridiculous and silly and dorky and historically and mythologically accurate book of cocktails, Greek mythology themed cocktails. It is, I finally have a copy of it and I've been like talking about it more on my podcast and stuff. And it is truly like, it's just so fun for nerds. Like the way they just let me go really viscerally dark and weird and gross and in depth into the mythology and history. Like I think it's just going to be beloved by classicists and like maybe very few other people, and I'm totally fine with that. But yeah, so it's called Nectar of the Gods. It's available everywhere. And then my other book is the Greek mythology, the gods, goddesses, and heroes handbook, which is just sort of like a primer on Greek mythology and is also available everywhere. But the cocktails are really the fun one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to making and trying
Yes.
Agamemnon's bathwater. That's the one I've heard of.
Yes.
My favorite.
Yes.
And then I have Jason's Folly, because the thing is that with cocktails, I didn't have to pretend like I was even remotely, not biased. So Jason's is called Jason's Folly. Theseus is The Crimes of Theseus. There's Agamemnon's
Yes.
bathwater. And then I gave, it just, I had so much fun. Ariadne's is Ariadne's Naxian Escape, because it's all about how she escaped from
Nice.
Theseus.
I'm
Met
so
up with
happy.
Dionysus. I'm just trying to think of other like well-themed ones for this to share, because it's really quite silly. Oh, Circe's Potent Potion is one. That's good stuff. There's a Minoan Margarita, a Bronze Age
Ooh.
Collapse, and
Oh,
a
yes. Oh,
and a
yes.
Plato's Theory of Atlantis. So
My gosh.
Plato's Theory of Atlantis, the very last line of it and its instructions and everything is just enjoy while considering the merits of archaeology. And I really
Brilliant.
I have fun. I had a lot of fun. I could talk about it forever.
I'm so excited to make these and try these. Yay.
Very glad. It's really so silly.
Well, of course, you're welcome back anytime to talk about anything talk about cocktails. We can do cocktails we dig. I would very much love that. It was great having you on the show, and we'll see everyone around. Bye.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.